Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Leadership Enigma. Over 50 episodes, over 50 guests as we now hurtle. Only next week is the first year anniversary of the Leadership Enigma. Who would have guessed? Do me a favor, reach out, connect, LinkedIn, however you want to do it, and share with me some of your favorite episodes. Tell me who I should be talking to. Tell me the themes that you'd like me to focus on in 2021. Get in contact and let's start the conversation. So listen, I'm getting older, but I still love my tennis. I just need to get better at tennis. What do I need? I need a coach. But working with leaders across sectors, levels, and geographies, many people talk about executive coaching. And so I've got a friend and colleague who's going to help us now in relation to deconstructing and demystifying what is executive coaching and what is the role that it has for us. In fact, this episode is called Coach-ulting. Yes, I did say that right. And so one of my first questions to the wonderful Stephen Corns will be, what on earth does that title mean? Come back to me just after this.
You're listening to the Leadership Enigma, powered by Transform Performance International, a podcast for the insatiably curious to explore the power of human-centered leadership to create real momentum for positive and sustainable change. Whether you're an entrepreneur, business owner, or corporate executive, each week we speak to global experts, academics, rising stars, ambitious upstarts, and disruptors as we discover that success leaves clues. Now, here's your host, Adam Pacifico.
So it's a massive welcome to Stephen Corns to the Leadership Enigma. Now, Stephen is a learning designer, global educator, executive coach, specializing in leadership development facilitation. He's worked for 17 years in this area in 28 countries and across sectors, levels, and geographies, with the FTSE and the Fortune companies. And it says here, Stephen, in this intro, blah, blah, blah. But that wasn't for now, was it? Welcome to the Leadership Enigma, my friend.
Thank you for having me, Adam.
Also says here, he's Scottish, he's a Londoner, and he's here today. It's a massive welcome to... Anyway, you and I both have a lot of toys in our studios where we have all the gear and very little idea. But it's a massive welcome to you because you are going to talk to us about executive coaching.
Yeah, and I think one of the first things to point out is that these toys are now necessary. We cannot go through this world of communication and continue to rely on the technology of yesterday. So I know in your studio you have an exceptional amount of toys, and I have continued to develop my toy collection as a process and tool for my coachees to better support them. Yeah.
Well, let's be honest, we should share the story, shouldn't we, that you were over here in my studio at some point, on your hands and knees, actually analysing the leads, which I have no idea what they do, but I think you're probably more knowledgeable than I am about all of this now.
It's the world's changed, Adam, and you've got to grab and hold on to tomorrow, and that this social virtual connectivity requires a different approach, and that I didn't feel that I was giving my customers, my clients, what they needed using a laptop in my living room. So I a bit like yourself, I've adapted what is one small spare space in the house to suit my clients' needs. Yeah.
And I'm looking at it on screen. It looks pretty good to me. I mean, you're right. I mean, I've seen you're a formidable educator in person, in front of a room, the way you hold a room. But obviously you've been doing all of your work, all of your work really, in a virtual space now. You are virtual Stephen.
And that's right back since actually before the pandemic began. I think that I did my first virtual delivery somewhere in around 2014, 2015.
Right.
And yeah, continue to do that now because I've got a global client base. And this is one of the opportunities that virtual gives us, is this ability to work with people across the globe without the additional cost of travel or time.
It's changed everything, really, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Now, everyone's got a bit of a story, well, a lot of a story, who comes onto the Leadership Enigma. And so tell us a little bit about yours, because how did you end up being, amongst other things, an executive coach?
Yeah, it's a combination of a different things. I don't think anyone plans to become an executive coach. I think it's somewhere that you end up following a path that may not be a straight line. I can start at the beginning and do the fast version, which is one, I was never any good at exams. I was really bad at exams at school. But once I got into university and started to work much more on a project by project basis and delivery, that I really started to develop those skills around learning and being able to support my own learning thinking. I left there, went into consultancy, worked in IT consultancy for various different organizations in different industries, left that, moved into investment banking, where I worked in the city here in London, despite my accent, of course. And then from there, turned right, went to drama school, became a professional actor, mostly doing theatre and voiceover. And that combination and background of skills, that drama-based perspective added to that business understanding and experience, moved into the world of leadership development to better support leaders, to mostly to communicate, actually. But again, the use and understanding of business theory was incredibly useful to my client base.
Did that feel like a natural move for you? Because you had maybe an eclectic mix of skills, experience, and capabilities. So did this feel like a natural move, or did you find it by chance?
I found it very comfortable. So maybe natural, yes. I feel very comfortable speaking the language of business, and I think my coachees particularly enjoy that, and the people I work with know that they don't have to translate, which is very useful. I also think that one of the core components of being a strong leader is the ability to communicate, but it's not necessarily a category that you get promoted based on. And I think that's a really interesting little space as well. Part of your enigma is getting promoted into roles that require skills that you have not been trained in.
Now, I've got to ask you this question because I talked about the title of this episode as Coach-ulting. Help us understand that title.
Yeah, Coach-ulting was a kind of concept that I kind of developed over time, which is that the traditional models of coaching, and again, I'm being very broad here, the word coach can mean so many different things. For me, and this is my interpretation, in executive coaching, we recognize a continuum that sits within, on one side of the continuum, the word coaching, and on the other side of the continuum, the word mentoring.
Right.
And that we tend to use this as a sliding scale of where you sit within that executive coaching environment. Are you a coach? Do you have a psychology background? Are you a mentor? You have a very successful career in business and perhaps have a C-suite background. And we move from one to the other. I wanted to recognize that there's a third dimension to this, which is that there's also the educational side of coaching, which is, as a coach, I can also support senior leaders by educating them, whether that's on what is happening in the larger world or space in which they inhabit as a leadership or leadership team, right. Or as an organization or as an industry, but also about what I would call leadership and management theory. So again, in my curious stage, in particular around executive education, I went back to university again and did a master's degree in executive education with the excellent Warwick Business School, and got absolutely fascinated by this concept of coaching and education and where those two things sit together. And so the concept of coach-ulting is actually, it's a good idea to share thoughts, theories with senior leaders.
Okay, so let's go back to basics, because some people won't even understand maybe what is an executive coach and what is it that you do in the role of that executive coach?
I think that executive coaching, first of all, has to recognize the challenges that executives face at a senior level. Much of the work that I do is supporting individuals who may feel that they are on their own, actually, which is a really interesting concept at a senior level.
So lonely.
Yeah,
they say it's lonely at the top, don't they?
And I think that's really interesting language. And one of the challenges is to remove that pithy phrase from people's mindsets, because the question I always ask people at that moment is, does saying that help you? right? And reflecting on that little moment. So what does executive coaching mean to me? What is it? It's support. It is, the words I like to use are a critical friend.
Right.
It is holding up the mirror to people and asking them to reflect on their actions, their behaviors, their thinking. It is the critical side of that, which is asking the hard questions.
Right.
And in order to ensure understanding and even just encourage internal debate, it's okay to have a conversation with yourself. Does this feel like the right thing? Is this the right thing? And also it's about supporting people's thinking beyond where they are just now. So I will absolutely challenge assumptions. And in the support mechanism, most importantly, I like to make sure that it's fun and enjoyable. I see no reason that this creative space in which you're working with someone can't be exciting and dynamic and different. And to do that, you've got to beg, borrow, and steal from lots of different worlds, lots of different places.
You know, I like the phrase the critical friend. And so do a lot of people, when they come to you for the first time, think that you're going to give them all the answers, or do they anticipate that you're just going to ask really smart questions in order to help them get to the answer, or is it a combination of the two?
It's absolutely the combination, which I enjoy, because the one of my great joys is when a coachee says to me, "So what do I do?" And I will absolutely tell them, if you ever ask me this, and I'll set it up at the start, I'm going to ask you that same question right back again, because I'm just going to hold up the mirror on that one, and recognize that as an executive coach, I cannot run the race for you. Right. Now, you talked about your tennis and having a coach for tennis, and I think it's a fantastic metaphor at the moment. Sport in business is an outstanding metaphor, because we have people who are playing on the pitch in that team that need to be accountable and support each other, but the coach can only influence from the sidelines.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And
so that's,
everyone needs a good coach, right? Even if you're the best in the world. So if you're the best golfer, the best tennis player, the best footballer, the best, I don't know, the top ranking CEO, you still need a coach.
Yeah. And one of the great beauties of the internet is the democratisation of coaching, that there are a selection of digital platforms out there now where you don't have to be the best to get a coach, which I think is wonderful, right? That I can sign up as a new manager or junior manager to a coaching digital platform and get coaching.
It's not just for the top of the house.
No, this idea of democratizing coaching, I think, has rich reward for not just organizations, but for individuals as well. Go hunt them down. You know, those websites, they're not as expensive as you might think, but incredibly valuable.
There's an inclusivity piece there as well in relation to just the accessibility of good coaches. That takes me to my next question. What are the kind of key areas that you find yourself supporting people on at the moment? Now, I'm mindful that we are coming through, with fingers crossed, a global pandemic, but can you just give us some of the themes that you're hearing and seeing again and again?
Yeah, I could probably give you some examples at this point, and I think that's pretty useful for framing these sort of things. At the moment, I think I have 13 different coachees that I'm working with across the globe.
Right.
They pretty much cover from West Coast US all the way to Thailand at the moment, I think is furthest east.
Right.
Some of the things that they are working on, I'll give you some quick examples. I'm working with the president of an organization. They are absolutely about strategic planning for tomorrow, in particular about growth of the organization, right? So it's an exponential growth challenge.
Right.
Much of the work we do together is about structuring and strategy, and that strategy may include everything from external client engagement to internal motivation of team, and development of skills across the leadership team, for example. On the other extreme, I'm also working with someone who is new to role, who has just came in, a global investment bank, huge organization. They're taking on a new role that they have not done before, and I'm working with them on what I call the 4-point transition plan. 4-point transition plan, absolutely beg, borrow, and stolen from sports.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I got the idea and the concept from watching football, and said we've got 4 different phases in football. Yeah, we've got the ball and we're attacking. They have the ball and they're attacking. We've lost the ball. They've lost the ball. The 2 transition phases. And if you're new to role, it's no reason you can't use that exact same framework to design a structured approach to moving on that supports you, everyone around you, and the business to do better.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, to help us, what are the 4 points of the 4-point transition plan then? Just so we can lay those out clearly for the listeners.
Yeah. So number 1, you are leaving your role. How are you leaving it stronger than it was when you were in it?
Right.
Number 2, you're transitioning out of your role, so you've got a handover process.
Right.
Right. Number 3, you're moving into the new role, which means you have someone else has a handover process. And number 4, you are in new role and you're now rocking and rolling. So those 4 key steps create a structure that we can start to plan what happens next, which makes everyone more comfortable, empowers everyone around you, and ensures there's less risk as you transition into that role.
I love that, Stephen. I think that might be useful to me as well. Now, are you finding that people are coming to you as well with technical issues or human-related issues, or do they sometimes come to you without really knowing what the challenge is for them, and they're trying to uncover that as well?
Yeah, there's a selection of key challenges around this. It's when we say technical, yes, when it comes to strategy and organizational structuring, absolutely. Right. And again, because of that business background, I'm pretty comfortable supporting people with that. The other side of that is the personal side of things, which kind of falls into 2 categories. One is self.
Yes.
And self-management, self-motivation, self-well-being, and looking after self. And the other one is others, is thinking about, well, I understand that something has changed or something is not working. How do I support other people better in doing something differently, which is the motivational side of self.
Now, I know the importance and the power of a good coach. And my question to you is, what are some of the key learnings that you are taking away by being an executive coach for you personally?
I'd say first point that I would take away is that confidence impacts everything.
Tell me more.
Confidence impacts everything because our ability to be able to see a path forward fundamentally sits in confidence, and that everyone gets confidence from different places, from different directions, and in different ways. We could talk about, behavioral styles, models, etc. But the fundamental thing is I am motivated by different things than other people. Right. So I get confidence from different things than other people.
And energy.
Absolutely right. That my energy comes from a different perspective too, that my decision-making is essential as part of that. It's very hard if you're not feeling confident to make a decision. Not even make the right decision, just make any decision if you're not feeling confident about it. I think the other thing that I've realized most recently, particularly within this virtual world, within this pandemic environment we're sitting in just now, is vulnerability is something that I have seen people embrace in order to be a leader. That leadership requires people to be more open and honest about how they are feeling in this world, to create that psychological safety for others to also share. Right. I had a fabulous conversation with one of my coaches who said that their leader on at least once a week would phone them. This person is no longer with this organization, which is an interesting outcome.
Right. It's another episode there in itself.
Yeah. And they said that every week this leader would phone them up and ask them how they were. And that the person I was coaching said the only thing I could say was fine. I did not feel that I had the psychological safety to be honest with how I was actually feeling.
So really, the question is nothing more than lip service.
The words, yeah, absolutely, but the congruence was missing, right? That the words were the right thing to say, but the way and the purpose and the reasoning behind them was faulty from that leader, because the impact And again, I don't know who the leader was, but the impact was, I cannot be truthful here.
Now, you mentioned vulnerability, and I've been working on the 7 components of human-centered leadership. I just did an interview, and I can't remember if it was last week or the week before, where one of my guests said it's time for leaders to take the mask off. And they were talking about now that ability to be vulnerable in themselves and with their people, because we've been through a global pandemic. And Stephen, I'll ask you this question. I had this conversation with a group of leaders in India only this morning, and obviously they are still battling to try and get COVID under control. And one of the things I was chatting about is I'm hearing leaders now talk about very personal, reflective questions, such as, and these are very senior leaders, such as, am I happy? What is my value proposition? These are people with 25 and 30 years experience in service, Stephen. Do I ever want to go back into an office? Do I really need to live in the city or even the country within, which my business operates? I'm feeling anxious over commuting. I don't remember hearing a plethora of questions like that previously. Are you hearing that as well, that there's real self-reflection and sometimes self-doubt in very, very senior people because they've been reflecting over the last 15 months? It was an amazing quote. I've just remembered it, and it's not from me. And it was, someone said, when you press the pause button on a computer, it stops. But when you press the pause button on a human being, that's when we start to think. And we've all had an opportunity to really think over the last 15 months. What are your thoughts on that?
It's across the world where people are reflecting and measuring differently what has value.
Right.
And that you can see so much effort going into words like purpose at the moment, not just at a individual or leadership level, but at an organizational level as well, is that everyone is looking at the world in a different way. That the world has changed, right? That fundamentally, and it's and one of the key things we have to recognize is it's not going to go back to what it was. But it's also not going to stay the way it is, right? And we're definitely moving towards that hybrid world. And I think that one of the things that always motivates me and that I share with some of my coachees is, have you ever watched the movie Jerry Maguire?
Oh yes, show me the money.
Yeah, which is the quote that everyone remembers. But if you remember, the reason he got into so much trouble was because he tried to change who he was, right? Right. And he goes through this entire process of realization that he wasn't actually happy. Right? Jerry goes through this entire process, and he writes his manifesto, which is the things we say but cannot do. Is that what his manifesto is called?
You're testing my movie knowledge now, Stephen.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Well, I know the quote at the end. And the quote at the end of his manifesto is, let us start a revolution. Let us start a revolution that is not just about basketball shoes or official licensed merchandise. I am prepared to die for something. I am prepared to live for our cause. The cause is caring about each other. The secret to this job is personal relationships. Now, if that's not a mantra to live by in this world, I don't know what is.
Do you know, I'm impressed with your movie knowledge and that you've been able to recover that from the back of your memory. But that's pretty powerful stuff, actually, isn't it, for us right now?
And it's amazing, right? But if you go back and watch that film now, it does feel incredibly relevant, right? That he has this eureka moment where he says, I don't have to do things the way I've been doing them. I can actually do this differently. It's not an easy transition for him, right? But it happens, and he ends up happier at the end of it.
Well, you know what? I never thought 25 minutes ago that Jerry Maguire was going to feature as part of this episode, as part of its pearls of wisdom. But listen, you're also the head of coaching and learning at the hybrid working digital SaaS platform, DuoMe. And this space is opening up now. You know, people are talking about, do we go back to live? Do we stay virtual? Do we move to hybrid? What on earth is hybrid? I don't know. We've dabbled at that. So give us a little bit about your thoughts about this space, because this isn't going away, you know, and I've heard the phrase the new normal. I'm not sure I like that. I'm not sure it really reflects what we're moving towards. But what are some of your thoughts about the hybrid working environment, or is and have the ways of working fundamentally changed forever? Sorry, big question, Stephen, but you know where I am.
Yeah, I think to put it all into sort of like a framework, Adam, so we can review it. I think that the core here is that GeoMe was an organization that I joined something like 3 years ago now. It's pre-pandemic, yeah.
Yep.
And GeoMe is a digital platform that supports organizations, and what they want to do is to improve collaboration and efficiency across their business. Okay, but the purpose of having GeoMe is to do and use a digital approach to support hybrid working that includes tools and new ways of working that make working in hybrid more efficient, inclusive, and productive. And the reason I got involved in that project in particular is I'm head of learning and coaching within the organization, supporting some of our members.
Right.
And also thinking about the educational aspects for organizations about how the platform can help them. It's game changing out there, is this word hybrid. And I think a lot of people think that they understand what the word hybrid means. I've been studying it for something like 3 years. I got really interested in it pre-pandemic.
Right.
In trying to understand, well, what does the future look like in ways of working? And we've done a great deal of research at GeoMe, and what we've realized is this is an incredibly complex way of working, and that to simplify it is just a demonstration that we don't fully understand it. I give you an example.
Sure.
I asked a coachee of mine, and they talked, as they were talking about future ways of working, they recognized that some of their staff would be working from home.
Right.
And so I said to them, so what do you mean by hybrid working? And they said, well, some people will work from home and some people will come into the office on certain days. And I said, well, I'm going to ask you a question, right, which will tell me how well you understand hybrid working. And they said, okay. And I said, my question is this: what impact will your hybrid working policy have on your diversity and inclusion strategy? And after that incredibly awkward silence.
Did I replicate the silence well enough?
You did it very well, absolutely. They recognized they had absolutely no idea what the impact would be. And I said, and that's the challenge that we have, is that it's complex, it's big, it has multiple components. And to assume that we know what the word hybrid means is as the Dunning-Kruger effect. You know Dunning-Kruger effect?
No, help me.
If you assume you understand, you're overestimating your own competence.
Right.
Right. So it's actually, and one of the useful tools of coaching is that the coaching approach questions that assumption. Right. So I questioned that assumption by asking a second question, and they suddenly realized that they're using a word because it's easy to understand, but hadn't considered the process or the impact that that word was going to have on their business.
So we can't solve that problem right now, but as leaders start to grapple with the term hybrid, they use it, they hear it, they start to consider it. Let's take things at its starting point. Where should leaders begin on that journey in relation to what hybrid means to them and their organizations?
Yeah. So there's there's three core components to reflect on here.
Okay.
First component is education, right? Is making sure that people understand what the term means in all its breadth and depth, right? Because if you want to create a hybrid working model for your business, it has to be hybrid for everyone.
Okay.
Right? That's the way it works, right? In order to be inclusive, it has to suit everyone's needs. The second thing to reflect on here, and again, I think this is thinking about it from the GeoMe perspective, this is why we went down the digital route, was saying, what is going to make it easy for your employees to adapt and adopt these new ways of working? What infrastructure are you putting in place that makes it easy for everyone, right? Because yesterday's tools won't work tomorrow.
Right. So once you've defined it, you've got to have a system or an infrastructure for people to adapt and adopt.
Absolutely. And then third one is you've got to have resources to do it. Now, those resources might be as simple as money,
Right.
But they might be internet, right? Or, upgrading of the tech, or, yeah.
So this is probably an unfair question. It's always an unfair question towards the end. It's because I'm curious. What can the listeners take away from this very short conversation that we're having? Do you have any top tips for people who may be considering coaching for themselves, or who may be considering coaching for their team, or who may be considering coaching as part of the DNA of the learning process within the organization? That's a ridiculously wide question again, Stephen, isn't it? But any top tips that are front of mind for you?
Sure. I think first off, find someone to help you out. Whatever it is you're going through, whatever it is you're doing, don't feel the need to do it on your own. And the second one is, if we are going down the coaching route, the chemistry process, and this is terminology that we use for the first meeting with someone, is find someone you can work with, not necessarily someone who is like you,
right?
But someone you can communicate with, who you will be comfortable when they disagree with you. I think that recognize that your view of the world is unique. So you are unique, right? And your view of the world is unique, and we all view the world through a different lens.
And valid.
Everything's valid, absolutely, right? It's because it's your lens. You own that lens, yeah. So be prepared for that chemistry session.
Yep.
And ask questions, right? Never assume that the coach is going to drive that meeting. That's your meeting for your benefit. So drive that forward. And I think the third one is be clear on the processes that work for you. As I mentioned previously, the approach that I take sits within that Coach-ulting model, which is very much includes education and models to support decision-making and action. But that's not right for everyone. Some people would prefer the much more psychoanalytical route of coaching, where it's much more focused on self-reflection and that support mechanism. Others maybe want the mentoring side, which is, I need to work with someone who's been through these leadership challenges previously and can share my experience. Yeah.
Okay.
Choose. So make a choice. Most importantly, enjoy the process. It's about you.
That's pretty good advice in itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, how can people connect with you if they want to get in touch, continue the conversation, find out more? Best way?
Oh, always LinkedIn. I had LinkedIn.
And help people know exactly what you're in LinkedIn as.
I will be under the Duo Me banner as head of learning and coaching under my name, Stephen Corns. I'm fortunate to have an unusual last name with an E that appeared in my dad's birth certificate, but no one else is in the family. So,
really?
Yeah.
So there you have it. There, you can find you easily enough in LinkedIn. Yeah. Now, my final question, which I'm now asking all my guests: what would be, in your view, the best piece of leadership advice you've given or received?
One thing that always stuck with me, and I wish I'd learned this a lot earlier than I did. I only heard this about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe now. Was a saying around pretty much about the future, and it was, the currency of tomorrow's workplace is no longer the ability to read and write. The currency of tomorrow's workplace is the ability to learn.
And unlearn.
Oh, you know that one. Nice. And unlearn. Who was it?
No, I don't know. I just added that to the end. Have I just done something rather wisdomful?
It could have been. I suspect it will be, yes.
So I love that phrase. And also I think that the power of unlearning is also something I'm going to deal with in a future episode. Very difficult, isn't it, for very senior and experienced people to sometimes kind of put to one side their wisdom, their experience, their education in order to take on a new set of learning or beliefs.
Well, it came up in a coaching session this morning.
Okay.
Literally, it came up in a coaching session this morning. We were talking about walking in the client's shoes. And I said, yeah, but you need to take off your own shoes first.
Right.
Yeah.
Love it. Oh, it's going to make a great video series as well, this, which is always good. Listen, Stephen, you're an absolute star for jumping in at short notice and being part of the Leadership Enigma. I hope you've had fun, and I hope you'll come back to us and do more great stuff.
I would welcome that, absolutely. Hybrid is the future. This is the hybrid approach to everything that we're doing, right?
As we look at each other in our various studios with our various kit, we have so much to learn. Stephen, you've been a star.
Thank you, Adam.
Join us again next week for more tips and strategies on the Leadership Enigma. We'd love to hear your comments on today's show, as well as suggestions for future topics and guests. Get in touch with your host on LinkedIn or visit the dedicated website, www.leadersenigma.com, powered by Transform Performance International, where you can access our exclusive learning, including books, videos, bonus content, assessments, and more. Please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe on all your major podcast platforms. Thanks for listening.